Hello, listeners of the Art Versations podcast.
Hi. My name is. Hi. My name. Hi. My name is Broadway Classic.
Let's hear it.
Thank you, Crystal Bean, for that theme song. Welcome back to another episode. My name is Bri, like the cheese. If you're new here, here's a special little note of thank you for tuning in. Lovely to have you. We're so close to reaching 1,000 total plays for the podcast. Something that I never thought I would actually reach when I started this podcast. So please continue to tune in and listen. I thought I would update the podcast cover art with a design by one of my best friends, Nisa Gregorio. It's so cute, and I'm sure you've already seen it, so thank you to her for that. Let's get into the podcast. This week, my guest was Kalil Haddad. He is a filmmaker, an editor, and he graduated from York University's film program about a year ago. We talk about his recent film projects and get into some fairly deep topics about the state of art right now. And it was really enjoyable to hear what he had to say. Please enjoy episode 12 of season 2.
I'm watching unpronounceable cinema or what have you.
Yeah, now's the time. Hi, Kalil.
Hi. Thank you so much for having me.
Of course.
I'm doing well. You?
I am doing good. It feels a little bit weird not being in the space with my guests, but we're doing it. We're Zoom has been pretty good so far. So how are you feeling? Like, what's your mental health right now? We'll check in.
Mental health, feeling pretty good. Honestly, trying to stay productive through all of this. Kind of takes your mind off everything. But at the same time, as hard as things are right now with the current environment, it does feel really great to kind of have that break from work and kind of be able to focus on creation again. I feel like a lot of artists get so kind of bogged down in 9-to-5s or even part-time jobs that it kind of becomes difficult to create and to kind of find that mental capacity to do so. So I do feel like it's almost like a creative little vacation, honestly.
That's awesome.
Having this period of time.
Yeah, and maybe it'll help you create your best work. You never know, right? Like just having the space and the time to take care of yourself as well as the projects you're working on. I think that's really cool. Definitely. That you're staying productive, because I know some people are also taking this as a time to just not do anything creative and maybe focus on just themselves. But yeah, I think keeping yourself distracted, keeping yourself busy is kind of the answer to all this.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, I just feel like at least for myself, and I'm sure a lot of artists too, it's like I said, so hard to find the time. So it's so tempting to kind of just kind of takes us a vacation period of just I'm just going to relax. But I feel like after a while, it gets a little boring.
Yeah.
There's only so much you can relax. I'm I'm relaxed enough. Let me do something else now.
Yes. Yeah. That itch starts to come back of I need to do something. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Seriously. After a while, just not being productive, it just eats at you. I feel like.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's cool. Is there anything recently that you've seen or maybe you read that you didn't have time for usually that you're totally sparks something in you? Or
yeah, I feel like there's so many, especially as a filmmaker, there's so many essential films, like canonical kind of works that should be seen by filmmakers, really important works. And I feel like although I have seen a lot of them, there's so many that I also haven't seen because the canon is so large, of course, right?
Totally.
That it's also been giving me a lot of time to kind of catch up on some of those films that maybe I didn't have time for. Right.
That's good.
That's been really nice as well. Definitely.
Anything specifically?
Yeah. It's a lot. I saw, I've been using my Criterion channel subscription a lot during this time. So they have a lot of course, classic, art house kind of stuff. And there's this film, and I apologize because I cannot pronounce the name. It's Portuguese.
Okay.
I believe it's Pixote, I think, but it's about, it's Pixote, but it's about street kids in Brazil. And it was just this very amazing work, really underrated, piece of foreign cinema. And I finally got around to seeing that. It's been a huge influence on a lot of big filmmakers, some of who are my inspirations, uh, like Harmony Korine, the Safdie brothers,
Okay.
a lot of like newer kind of art house filmmakers are inspired by this work, and so it's really great to see. I feel like it's so important to watch the films that are influencing your influences rather than
Okay.
just watching your influences, because they're just regurgitating what they've seen,
Oh,
right?
okay. I see what you mean. Yeah. There's
In a
kind of
sense.
this
So
chain of inspiration that gets passed through people, I guess.
it's like playing a game of broken telephone almost, right? It's
Right,
like,
right.
what pieces are they being inspired by? What are they carrying over into their work, right? And
Mm-hmm.
we're supposed to just like taking their work at face value, see where they're influenced by, and you see what else is in this piece that can influence me as much as the filmmakers I love have influenced me and they've been influenced by this work.
That actually kind of brings up a larger question of how uh, how everything now is being referenced, or art is such a
Mm.
is just a reference of another thing in some ways. Like I don't know. I always have this like deep dark like thought that like art is kind of dead and there's everything is just like referential and it's not original
Mhm.
anymore. Do you ever feel that or?
Yeah, it's interesting you bring that up. Actually, I was reading last month this book by Mark Fisher, who's a theorist, called "Ghosts of My Life," and
Okay.
it's about what he calls hauntology and lost futures. Something that I think my work plays a lot into, this idea of lost futures, and that's
Mm.
the idea of what once would could have been but now can't. Um, and the idea that kind of we live past what he calls like the gold rush of culture. We look back at like the last half of like the 20th or 21st century, or 20th century rather. Sorry,
Mm-hmm.
we look back on the last half of the 20th century, it's 60s onward, right, 50s even, and we see like all these amazing innovations, decade by decade. They have their own individual kind of feel and look and style, right?
Right.
And now post internet, we kind of live in this time where everything is just an extension of itself,
Yeah.
where culture moves, because it's so wide reaching at this point. Culture moves at such a slow speed
Right,
that we
right.
don't have those kind of distinctions anymore, and so we go through like these we just go through constant regurgitation. Instead of trying to innovate, we find comfort in what was and try and continue to build on that.
I mean, I guess it's not to say that art is dead. Like it's not a complete stop or anything. But yeah, it does say that if you have an idea or an inspiration, you can build on it. You can add layers to it, I guess.
Exactly. And yeah, no, it's definitely not dead, but going back to the idea of just of influences and
Mm-hmm.
and the Brazilian film whose name I can't fully pronounce. Uh, just that idea, the idea that that someone was influenced by this work, right? And instead of trying to innovate past that, we just continue to play on those aesthetics.
Hmm.
And I think there is a danger to that, because art doesn't die, but it becomes less innovative. We see innovations in like technology and artistry over the course of the 20th century in filmmaking, or in a lot of art for that matter.
Mm-hmm.
And it feels like at this point, like there's only so many generations of filmmakers that can be inspired by Scorsese.
Right, right. Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? Like at a
Mm-hmm.
certain point, we have to kind of move past that, and we have to see like,
Yeah.
okay, so he inspired these people, but like, hey, not to say he's not an amazing filmmaker, he doesn't make great work still, but
Yeah, yeah.
what's beyond this, right? Like what are the new kinds of forms that are being played with at this point that maybe we didn't see in the 60s, instead of falling back into these
Mm.
ideas of what um, cinema was in the past being the correct and only answer to what it should be.
Oh, wow. Yeah, I love that. That's a really interesting, like, also modernist look at filmmaking so that you can
Hmm.
do new things, keep innovating. That's really great.
Hmm.
Yeah, yeah. You said that your films often explore themes of sexuality, identity, lost futures. How have you, in your recent films or in anything, like given that to an audience, letting them interpret it that?
Letting them interpret themes, you mean?
Yeah, because I know that's such a very personal theme of sexuality, identity. Like people are going to be interpreting it different ways. How do you give that in a little present when you make a film?
Mm, that's an interesting question. Um, I think the best thing a filmmaker do can do is be thematically indirect, and not to say that it's obscured, but I think there is an error in formulating a film around a thesis or around a concept rather than finding that within your work. Like
Okay.
I think like I would categorize my films in that sense, what you said, identity, sexuality, and lost futures. Because as I move through my work and as I create individual pieces, I see commonalities and shared themes. Even if the form of the film is different, so whether it's a documentary or an experimental film, or maybe it's fiction, maybe it's a combination of all three, right?
Okay.
But I
Okay.
think that there's these common themes that underline my work, and I think it speaks to the auteurist theory in that, like, an artist's work, no matter the form, is their work, and they're saying very similar things. People say like Tarkovsky made the exact same movie for his entire career, but just did it in different forms because he was always addressing the exact same themes.
Oh,
And
okay.
and not to say that I think my work can't reach outside those themes. I'm not limiting myself, and I don't think an artist ever should, to stick within their brand, for example.
Hmm.
But as I go, like, I'll go back and watch older films even of mine, and even from like 3 years ago, like not that old. So at this point, I have 4 films. So my oldest being in 2017. Or like I've been making films all my life, but what I would call like my
Hmm.
professional, like canonical kind of stuff.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, from 2017 onward.
Yeah.
And I'll go back and I'll look at those older films and I'll see traces of Farm Boy, my latest work in it. Or like
Mm.
I'll see these common themes that maybe I didn't notice at the time, but as I continue, these themes to a greater extent seem to underline my work.
Cool. Cool. It kind of just comes out over
It
the
kind of comes out,
span.
yes,
Yeah. Yeah.
naturally. And I think if those themes don't come out naturally, I think that's a mistake. And I think it can feel like a contrivance. It can feel forced.
Okay.
I think a filmmaker should let their work function as an extension of themselves and what they're going through. And I think that where I am in my life and the periods of my life I've gone through do influence my work, and my style changes or the way I address the topics change. But I
Mm.
think there's the topics that themselves are things that continue to interest me. And whether that means it's not out of my system fully, or I'm looking at I'm looking at it from a different perspective, maybe. Um, I think I think it's just inherent to the author of the work, their text. That of course if the work is an extension of the person, then it's the person always shining through, and that person remains true to themselves, and as such, their thematics continue.
That's beautiful. That's like a really,
Thank you.
like, it makes me happy to know that like people are like you are making art like that. Because I think
Mm,
for the longest time I've watched people make art and they feel nervous to completely be themselves in their art. They feel like
mm.
it's gonna be, it's embarrassing or somehow like something like that. So
No,
it's nice
and
to
I think,
hear.
yeah. Oh, thank you.
Yeah.
And I think that kind of conceit um is such a mistake on the part of artists to be afraid to innovate. And I'm not saying that I don't have my own inspirations, but I think playing it safe is never the correct answer. Who's ever gotten far by playing it safe? And I think it's important to be true
Yeah.
to you. And if your truth is something more mainstream even, or more accessible, I think that's fine. That's your truth. But I think stick to that. Don't try and be something you're not, or don't try and like, I would never create work from a perspective I couldn't understand.
Mm.
Right.
Yeah, they always say like
And
write
I
what you know, right?
exactly. And I
Yeah.
think the mistake is, like, I'll see uh, just random example, right? Like, I don't even have
Hmm.
this. I'm not even attributing this to a specific film, but like seeing some people maybe make like just a drama about like middle-aged people, but they're 20.
Mm.
Sure, you can do that, but how does that help you stand out as an artist?
Right,
How
right.
can you speak to that in such a way that it has the kind of profound impact that someone who is 40 or someone middle aged making that kind of work? Like, are you really speaking to your own strengths? And I think the error of artists, especially younger artists, in playing it safe, is not speaking to one's strengths, and as a
Mm-hmm.
result, kind of it backfires on them.
Mm-hmm.
They think they're reaching maybe a larger, broader audience with the work, but really what they're doing is limiting their impact.
Yeah, because I guess someone who's middle aged is going to look at the film and it might not be an accurate representation of what people that age are going through in some ways.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. But even beyond that, like, I think in different times of life we have such profound kind of perspectives and experiences. So why not speak to those? I think a lot of my films always speak to kind of the younger, like a youth experience,
Mm.
and that's because that's the period I'm making them in now.
Right,
As I'm older, like I wouldn't try and continue to stick within those types of films. I wouldn't want to be like 30 and trying to understand what it's like to be a 16-year-old. Like
Mm-hmm.
in a broad sense, that experience is relatively probably the same, but I think the superficial aspects of it, or even like the societal difference that surrounds it. Like we see, like even looking at like a teen film, right? Not to say I
Yeah.
make teen films, but looking at teen films from like the early 2000s, right? We see such a different perspective on the way we're talking about sexuality in my work, that like queer issues are portrayed in those films, right?
Yep,
And
definitely.
I think the way teens look at those issues as we progress in society and become more enlightened, we see these issues differently. So to try and
Mhm.
speak to an experience kind of in the past, I think is, or in the future, like we were mentioning before, is kind of a mistake. And I think it's the immediacy of art that is most impactful. And I think that's what we need to be addressing as artists.
That's really cool. That's really cool. Yeah, I think I agree. I'm not a filmmaker, but I think as I watch films, it's such
Mm-hmm.
an evolution. It's always changing. So we have to sort of play with that. Cool.
Right.
Should we talk about your most recent film right now, maybe? And then people can
Sure, why not? Let's do
understand.
it. Yeah.
Yeah, so Farm Boy was a short film. It premiered at the Texas Festival, exactly.
Q Fest
Something like
Houston
that.
in
Q
Texas, of
Fest.
course.
Thank
Yeah.
you very much. I did some research, but I guess not all of it.
No,
Yeah,
it's all
and
good.
yeah, let's talk about that. What was the inspiration for it, or how did you come to think of that idea?
Well, Farm Boy in one form or another is an idea that I've had for a really long time.
Cool.
I actually, at the end of high school, I purchased this book. I'm really interested in queer history. So I purchased this book called, by Will Fellows, called Farm Boys, Lives of Gay Men from the Rural Midwest. And it has no direct, it's not in a direct adaptation in any sense, but
Mm-hmm.
it's kind of, Will Fellows, the author, went and interviewed men born between 1900 and 1980 when the book was published. And so
Wow.
these 80 years of queer experiences in farmlands, or in the rural Midwest, sorry, and kind of the idea of like navigating sexuality in these kinds of places, and all these little biographical stories and these different perspectives he's able to cover. And it's so interesting hearing the different ways that that these men were able to kind of navigate their lives. You'll read a story from like 1920
Hmm.
about, oh, like my father knew and he was cool with it and it surprised me and I had like a happy upbringing. Read one from the 70s about, oh, I was kicked out of my family. Everybody in town found out I had to move towns. Like crazy stories. These, like, you'll find polar opposites in the same work and from different decades, and it's really fascinating. But so this book inspired the idea of I want to kind of cover the life of like a young guy, farm boy, in kind of a rural environment, and that idea of navigating sexuality and how one would do that, and this especially when queerness and is kind of seen as a more an urban kind of behavior,
Okay.
like as they would look at it, as opposed to rural, which is very like obviously it's very family oriented. You're on farms. You're seeing
Right.
the circle of life, right?
Hmm.
So kind of playing with this juxtaposition of urban and rural,
Okay.
and that kind of contrast, and seeing what would come what would come from that.
Mm-hmm. And is there like, does the main character, I'm assuming is the person that is going through this identity crisis, do they feel like the people around them are, certain ideologies or like traditional ways of thinking, is that clouding their growth and their development of their sexuality, or
Not
without
exactly.
giving too much away of the film, I guess?
Yeah, no, it's more about confusion.
Okay.
And again, I think a lot of my work is about identity and confusing identities,
Okay.
and trying to understand oneself. But Farm Boy is more in line with I would call it like an experimental fiction film. So it plays more like on dream logic. It's not
Mm.
it's not so much like, oh, there's scenes of people in the town like with differing opinions or nothing like that.
Okay.
It's more it's more kind of us trying to it's not trying, it's us as an audience within his psyche, trying to understand through dreamscapes and kind of experimental logic, trying to navigate this desire for urban life, for what he would see as freedom, but also kind of the danger in that.
Okay.
Fear of, like, for example, it might be more accepted there, but it's not my life.
Mm.
Right.
Okay.
So
Cool.
I can go there, but what's going to happen when I'm there? I mean, am I going to be subject to exploitation? Am I going to be lost in this big world? I'm going to be cutting all my family ties. Like these kinds of concerns, especially when we look at historically, rural kind of men in these urban settings are sexualized as objects because they are others.
Okay.
Because yes, they're
the
gay,
outcast.
but yes, they're the outcast, because although they may be gay, they are not, quote, gay. They are not aligning with this kind of shared experience. Like, for example, like social media, like Twitter gays.
Oh,
right?
I see. Yeah. The stereotypes. Like,
yeah. Like if we were gonna like just follow on a stereotype for this example, right? Not that I think we should necessarily, but if we're gonna follow on a stereotype, right? Of just like what we, even as suburban or urban kind of young people, see queer as, right? But what does someone with less knowledge of that, what does someone in a smaller community think of that as?
Oh, wow. Okay. That's cool.
Do you know what I mean? So it's,
yeah,
so yes, gay does exist in, as many identities do, in different forms. And it kind of comes down to who's perceiving it, the perspective it's coming from, right?
Right.
And especially for urban gays, the idea of this kind of, oh, this innocent guy from the country, he doesn't really know, like, I'm gonna kind of like, he's kind of like a challenge. And there's something about like the innocence of that is like fetishized.
Okay.
Right? Because if he wasn't here in this bar, right, or in this club where I am or wherever you're meeting, if he wasn't there, if I went up to him on a farm, he would appear as a straight guy.
Right.
And because he's a straight guy, he's a challenge, and he's innocent to kind of queerness. And there's something kind of tantalizing about that. And I think that's an issue in the gay community. So it's kind of about the fear of coming out to oneself and to one's family and your current situation, but also coming out to this broader new world where you are innocent to what surrounds you. And so I'd say Farm Boy isn't a coming of age drama as much as it's a film about like fear.
Okay, cool. Yeah, and confusion. Yeah.
Confusion,
especially when you have so many different opinions on what gay or what lesbian or what bi or pan is, right? Like,
right.
It in some cases there isn't really a definition, or there shouldn't be a definition. Yeah. And that's really interesting. Okay. Yeah, and as a filmmaker, you're wanting to put out these films, but then they get picked up by Aspect Ratio and B-Tape, and that's now you can actually give them to people. I think that's really cool that you have a distribution platform.
Yeah, no, it's really exciting especially to have that kind of support around your work, especially like as a younger person. We see filmmakers traditionally like as being older. That's kind of like the stereotype. And so to kind of find platforms and people who want to put work by young filmmakers, kind of fresh voices, I think is really important. And I'm glad we have kind of the infrastructure for that.
Do you want to just talk about your experience like with that and how your films have been opened up to a broader audience?
Sure. Well, I think a lot of it comes to, so both those distributors don't distribute online. They're festival distributors. Okay. But as I play more festivals as a filmmaker, it's such an amazing experience being able to see the other work, but also meet the other filmmakers involved and audiences and who want to see this kind of more experimental or radical work that maybe doesn't conform to mainstream sensibilities, or is kind of on topics that maybe people wouldn't necessarily consider diving into. And I would say, as much as I love festivals too, especially in a time like now when a lot of festivals are being postponed. Right. We had some festivals lined up for the next coming months that we've had to push back.
No.
Unfortunately.
Sorry
which
about
is too
that.
bad. but no, it's all good. It's everyone's going through this, right?
Yeah, but still,
Um,
you can grieve and feel bad. Yeah.
sure, exactly. But no, trying to stay positive.
Yeah.
Um, but I would say, yeah, I really do love festivals and the opportunity they provide. But um, for me, it's almost, especially like I was saying, at a time like now, um, just by sheer nature of their construct, kind of lack the immediacy of audience interaction the internet allows. I see so many like musicians. I see so many musicians just still releasing music. I see Charlie XCX is like making an album in quarantine from scratch, like, and they're allowed to kind of they're allowed to interact with their audience directly, and I think it's amazing. And festivals, although they're so cool to go to and such a great experience, they do lack that immediacy that a lot of creators, I think, do crave, putting their work out there directly and being able to see the immediate response from people, what their thoughts are, and um, kind of getting perspectives on their work that maybe are few and far between when it comes to maybe playing a festival once a month or once every 2 months, as opposed to
Right.
dropping something all at once and be able to see what the reaction is, which is always so exciting.
Yeah,
Uh,
it's cool to have like comments of people like right away being like, I didn't like this part, or I want to see more of this, certain things. Like, yeah, I guess the internet does allow for that, although it almost is too much information maybe sometimes.
Definitely sometimes, yeah.
Yeah.
Um, but I think especially in times like this, it's so important for artists to remember internet like as a tool,
Hmm.
almost, right? So there are these institutions like festivals and like physical distribution. If you were like a larger musician, of course, right? Like there are these, or even an independent musician releasing like cassettes and like through like smaller boutique kind of distributors, like I would be a
Right.
part of, right? Um, so it's so cool to kind of have it like out there physically in the world, but it's also just so it's such a great feeling having your work interacted with by kind of like a mass audience at the same time, right?
Totally.
And being able to
Yeah.
kind of get that response and hearing feedback, like you were saying, right?
Hmm. Yeah, and I mean, with it, even like in your film premiering at the Toronto Queer Festival, like, what does that feel like to have your film premiere right in your hometown, maybe with people that you like love and care coming to see you and support you, you know?
Right. Well,
Yeah.
yeah, that's the thing. It's so amazing being able to have like friends come out and like being able to like yeah, publicize it in advance and like having friends support you and want to engage with the work, and not just yours, but all the other filmmakers that are playing too. Because of
Totally.
course, I my work up until now was a lot of short films. Um, and so when I play the festival, it's not just me; it's me as part of a larger group,
Hmm.
and I think that communal experience is really important. And
Yeah.
and yeah, and again, the internet would negate that, and that's why I think it's interesting because there's these pros and cons to distribution methods, and I think now more than ever we're kind of in this time where so many even mainstream films like Cineplex films are being canceled, right, and
Yeah.
postponed. So seeing just the pros and cons of these different distribution methods that artists can kind of
Hmm.
get their work out. Because no matter what, you're interacting with audiences, you're doing all the similar things, but it's just I guess the means in which you're going about doing it, the pacing of it, that kind of stuff is really what makes the difference.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it is such a weird time, and I hope to God it's not going to be, you know, another
Yeah.
year of quarantine. Like
Oh God.
there's so many things that I've been, postponed on, and so many of my
Mhm.
friends have been. So it's weird now. We have to kind of adapt to this online version of things, but
Exactly.
sometimes the art can't live online.
Hmm.
Um,
No.
especially with, I
Yeah.
guess, like you said that a lot of your films are short, so maybe
Hmm.
that's easier to put online. But I think of like films and stuff where it is really the experience of being in a theater and watching it with other
Exactly.
people. Yeah.
And yeah, that's the thing. You definitely cannot compete with the experience, and it's always so great being able to see a film projected and on a big screen, of course.
Yeah.
But to that, I think that there is this exclusivity to festivals um, that a lot of people can't access them. Thankfully, in Toronto, where we have so many big ones, obviously TIFF, biggest
Hmm.
one, right,
Yeah.
is known as like one of the only festivals where it's the People's Festival, where people can kind of just people who are already in the city can kind of go to it if there's an
Right.
immediacy to it. Where a lot of other ones like Cannes or Sundance, it's like you're in that town for that festival.
Right. Right.
So TIFF already and Toronto already has this immediacy as a community, but by sheer virtue of the way festivals are constructed, it doesn't allow the greatest number of people to interact and see your work. So that's why I see the internet, especially in this time, is kind of a benefit.
Yeah.
That that artists who do want to still have, like, they still want to engage with their audience can release stuff, and they have a higher likelihood of people wanting to engage because they're home. They have the ability. They don't have to go out to a festival, book like a chunk of time if they're not able. Like, people have busy lives, of course. So it's great to be able to find other means, and the pros and cons of different means, like I was saying, to be able to interact with an artist. And I think it's just so important, especially in this trying time, to kind of keep art alive.
Yes to that. Oh my gosh, yes. I'm wondering, like, for you specifically, what are those platforms, those online platforms that you've been using over these last 3 weeks?
Well, I haven't been releasing anything myself. I'm currently working on a film. We shot it from July to November. So we kind of just took a break as life was happening, but now we kind of have time to kind of get back at it again. So I haven't released anything recently, but I'm honestly thinking about that film, just releasing it kind of directly online on Vimeo, where a lot of filmmakers are just putting their work on Vimeo. And allowing just a more immediate audience reaction, especially because we're in a weird time, like I was saying, where festivals are being delayed. So I'm playing festivals in I guess it would be the fall now. And so any work I create right now today couldn't even screen probably until the winter.
Yeah.
It's newer, but it by the time it premieres, it'll be a year old.
Right.
So there's something to kind of just being able to like drop the work, like I said, like a musician would, right? And just like and letting people kind of interact with it themselves on their own accord in their own time. Like
I wonder, I mean, you're not, it doesn't seem like you're frustrated by that, but I guess it does definitely shift things for someone who would rather a festival screening.
Yeah, it definitely shifts things. And again, it's not like, I love playing festivals, so it's not like an ideal necessarily. It is frustrating, especially because now I'll have a film in the fall that'll be over a year old by the time it's playing at the festivals.
Right.
Whereas suppose it would have, like our original plan was, by the time the year anniversary came around, it would have stopped its festival run, and we would have been looking at online distributors.
Okay.
Like streaming platforms.
Okay.
So that is frustrating because it has been pushed back, but it's still about trying to find the optimistic side, the underlying hope in all of it, I suppose.
Yeah, you have to. Yeah. Is there anything, while you're creating all of this, that you've recently discovered about your filmmaking, or, some kind of new pathway that you want to go down or something like that?
A new pathway. I've maybe not a new pathway.
Yeah.
No, I'm just trying to think. I don't know about a new pathway, but I think the struggle for a lot of artists is I had a friend call the 9 to 5 kind of the death of the auteur, right?
Okay.
And I think I might have said something along those lines earlier, but in the sense that kind of like the way capitalism functions, it traps artists in a cycle of work in which they're unable to create what they actually want. And so if you're working in film, you're aligning with corporate filmmaking, which I think in turn kills artistry, right? And so I think for me, moving forward, it's about like, I've felt a lot more productive in the last 3 weeks I've been quarantining than maybe I have in the last few months working. And not to say I didn't feel productive working, but I didn't feel productive myself as a filmmaker.
Right. Yeah.
So I think it's about finding that time for yourself, whether it's pushing yourself to work after work when you get home, or on the weekends, which I know can be really trying. And I was having trouble doing that as well. But I think it's such an amazing feeling, the feeling of creating. And I think that negating that in exchange for a further relaxation time, as nice as relaxing can be, isn't ultimately fulfilling.
Isn't or is?
It isn't ultimately fulfilling.
Okay.
Because as an artist, you want to be creating, and when you're not, it kind of it sticks with you in a way where it feels. For me, I don't feel like myself when I'm not creating, and I see that's the problem, because I think when artists don't create, and for me, it had only been like 3 months in the winter, just because it was winter, and who's not tired, right?
Yeah.
I think when an artist goes for too long without creating, you risk losing something. You risk losing an instinct that was there. It's like like a muscle. You're not exercising it. You're gonna lose it.
Okay. Yeah.
Do you know what I
So
mean, right?
yeah, no, I totally relate to that. I mean, even with dance, like I have to continue to be active even during this. And my little apartment doesn't really do much, but yeah, it is a muscle. It is a muscle that you're so used to using as well, like during the regular normal times that we've been living through. And then this
Right.
quarantine comes up and it's like, well, you
Hmm.
either choose to continue in whatever adapting you have to do kind of thing.
Exactly. And
Yeah.
especially when if you've been to like a film school or any art school, right? The idea of you're spending these 4 years creating, and
Mm-hmm.
then you're thrown into the real world, right? Where you don't have this infrastructure of needing to create to continue on. And so I feel like there's the risk of letting yourself kind of play fast and loose, where I'll do it next weekend. I'll start working on something then, and then next week you want to relax because this other thing happened. So over time, it kind of it stops being what it was, and I think that there's an issue with that, and there's a fear in that as well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think that's great that you've found this vacation to be something that is actually helpful and
Yeah.
giving you the space to create. I love that.
Hmm.
Yeah.
And I hope a lot of other artists are following suit. Like I know like I have some friends that I know are kind of they're kind of yeah leaning into relaxing or kind of struggling just because of everything going on in the world. It's so hard to kind of negate what's happening outside, right? And finding a hard time of focusing as a result. But
Yeah.
I do hope that a lot of artists are kind of able to kind of move past the negativity almost and see it as a really great opportunity. Of course, everything that's happening is terrible, right? But an opportunity in terms of free time to create instead of just lounging,
Mm-hmm. No, totally. Yep.
right?
And so you said you were working from home on like other, did you have like a stable job that's not in the arts or?
No, I have a stable job that is in the arts, but
Okay.
I'm working as an editor on a project right now on a feature.
Cool.
Um, so I've just been working from home on that part time. And other times I'm either yes creating my own stuff, or like I say, I'm watching unpronounceable cinema or what have you.
Yeah. Now's the time because no one's gonna, be beside you and having to translate with you.
Exactly.
Yeah. That's so
Honestly.
great. Okay, cool. So
Hmm.
yeah, and it's good that you have a job as well that's in the arts because you always hear, like you say, the people being 9 to 5 and a job they don't want to do, right?
Yeah.
And yeah, as an editor, do you what is working for other people? How do you find that
Mm.
being an editor for other people?
Um, it's a different experience for sure. Especially because as a director, I have my own instincts, right?
Right.
And even as an editor, editors have their instincts, of course, right? But it
Yeah.
can be, it's a different experience trying to navigate someone else's vision, um, whether or not you even agree with the vision itself, but still working in service of that as a fellow artist, right?
Right.
So it might not be my way of envisioning this material, but this is your way. So how do we make your way work?
Mm.
Because you're the director, you have a vision for this. So how can I help you bring that out and bring it into fruition?
Yeah, collaborating is tricky.
It's key,
It's,
and it's
yeah.
yeah, and it's so hard to work in film without collaborating. I think it's the most collaborative art form you can be a part of,
Mm-hmm.
right? And so I think it is about being able to work with others and kind of yeah, being able to see someone else's vision as if it was your own.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Hmm. Do you ever find that there are moments where you have to, the director or whoever is producing this film is the be all end all and you have to sort of
Hmm.
quiet your instincts or what you would rather do?
Definitely.
Okay. We don't have to talk about
Yeah, no,
specific experiences, but
no,
I'm
yeah.
just curious. Yeah.
No, definitely. There's for sure times where I'll cut something as I feel is appropriate. They won't see it the same way, maybe, and then I'm then cutting against my instinct. So again, working in service of them, but it's still, in a sense, it feels wrong.
Yeah.
it doesn't feel right to me naturally, but if it feels right to them, ultimately that's what I have to do. And so sometimes that can be tricky.
Mm-hmm.
Especially at the end of the day, it's still your name on the film. You're still getting credit for that work. So when it's work that maybe you don't feel you stand with, it can be not to say tricky, but it's such a different experience than going, oh, I as a director want this cut here. This is where it's happening, right?
Mm-hmm. But then
But
I
but
guess you
again,
can go and do your own things, and that's where you could put all of your instincts or
exactly.
instincts. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And that's what I was gonna say. I don't think it's like, again, I enjoy working for directors, so it's nothing about that at all.
Cool.
And I
Cool.
enjoy these experiences, and I think they're overwhelmingly positive than negative. But I think yeah, there is something to trying to understand another person's vision
Hmm.
ultimately, and whether or not it feels right or wrong for you is irrelevant.
Do you ever find that you have to read their minds sometimes? Like they don't give enough instruction or
Sometimes, and I'm sure I've been guilty at points of this as well on my own films. I'd like to
right.
think that I'm transparent in my direction, right?
Yeah,
But I think
yeah.
there's sometimes when a director sits with a film, like in their head, like whether it's for a long period or not, right? They have a way of seeing their own film,
Mm-hmm.
and because they're so used to it, um, and they're so like indebted to this these notions of what the film is, that they believe that that just transfers onto you
Yeah, yeah.
without explanation. And I think that's the tricky thing is, yeah, navigating their direction so that you're operating at the best you can and doing what they actually want, right? um yeah, especially when things aren't always super clear.
Yeah, I mean, it's all part of the process. And like you say,
Yeah,
it's such a collaboration. Like it really takes a village, especially for film. I
yeah.
like, I mean, I was on a film with my cousin Rebecca, who you know, obviously.
Hmm.
And yeah, the amount of people that were a part of even this one scene is so
Yeah,
interesting. And it takes a village. Like I said, like I really admire how much patience and how much team building has to go on to make a film.
right.
Yeah.
Because yeah, that's the thing. It's one thing to envision a scene in your mind. It's nothing to actually be able to execute it.
Yes, yeah.
Because obviously your imagination is limitless, right? But when it comes down to like cast or equipment or location, there's so many variables that interrupt your vision or
Mm-hmm.
have the potential to interrupt your vision, um, or to ultimately not maybe be the scene as you see it. And the only way it can be is through these collaborations with other people. Um, and that's why I think it's so important also for directors to kind of have a positive attitude towards their collaborators. I feel like there's so many directors who kind of just bark at their actors,
Mm.
or maybe don't even direct their actors, or at their crew, and ultimately the film is what it is because of that direction or lack thereof, right? I think it's important
Yeah.
to have open dialogue and to show appreciation and respect and kindness for all these people who are working in service of this thing that you imagined in your mind.
Yes, totally.
Ultimately, that's all it is. And so they don't owe you anything, right? They owe you nothing for this. So so I think it's really important for artists and filmmakers to show that kind of gratitude for these people who are really helping serve them ultimately and working as collaborators. You should be working with someone because you like their work,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Yeah.
Not because they can just push a bunch of buttons and just create something heartlessly or half-heartedly,
Mm-hmm.
right? It's like working with people
Yeah.
who you actually like, trust, you respect, you appreciate their work, and you want to collaborate with them.
Mm-hmm. Yes, exactly. It shouldn't feel like oh, I need to hire this person, Ugh, I
You're
don't want to
right.
have to. Yeah. And have
No, and
you built around like a good team of people that you like working with? Or yeah.
definitely.
Mm-hmm.
I've worked with my cinematographer Amin Samra. I've worked with him 3 times now. We're at this. Oh, sorry. We we just actually shot something a little recently, so 4 times. Two of them, like one of them is the one I'm currently editing, and another one is half shot. We took the opportunity while there was no one out, kind of out and about, to shoot some stuff at some locations that we may not have been able to.
Okay.
So we, with precautions, went out and shot a bit of a new film, half of a new film. So we
Nice.
now have 2 films together. They're out, and 2 that are currently in production. So I've been
Amazing.
working with him a few times. I've worked with the same actors a number of times, the same sound people.
Hmm.
Everett Major has done sound design for a lot of my films, has helped compose a lot of music for my stuff. And yeah, a lot of familiar faces in the actor department as well.
Cool. I feel like that just, it helps you make the best work too when you have trust in those
Definitely.
people. Yeah,
Exactly. And they know what your vision is. They know what you're going for.
totally.
Right. And
Yeah.
that's the most important thing, is it's picking those collaborators who understand you.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Right. And like I said, I think it's so easy to go like, oh, I need a cinematographer who knows how to work a camera. That's easy enough to find. I can find people to shoot a movie, but who understands the vision outside of a technical perspective?
Mm-hmm.
Who understands the influences going into the work? Who understands what I'm trying to go for?
Yeah. Yeah.
Right. And I
Yeah.
think
You
that's the
can find
important
anyone
part.
doing that.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Right. But it's about those people who really like get you, and that's who you want to be collaborating with.
Very cool. So speaking of your new films, please go ahead and plug whatever's coming up on Vimeo or otherwise.
So I have this new film. Like I said, we shot it. We started shooting in the summer. We shot it sporadically over a few different shoot dates. It's kind of cool. You see the seasons change over the course of the movie.
Oh, fun.
Yeah, we shot it from July to November. It's I don't want to say too much about it right now because we're still kind of like finessing it a bit.
Yeah, no problem.
It's called Tiger Eats a Baby. It's currently there's some like still photos on my website that just kind of tease the film at the moment.
Which I will link down below in the description.
Thank you
KalilHaddad.com.
Yes, thank you. So yeah, that's what we're currently working on. Tiger Eats a Baby. It stars one of the actors from Farm Boy, my previous film. So another actor collaboration. Again, shot by my cinematographer Amin Samra. We worked really closely together. It was kind of just us 3 going out and shooting.
Cool.
So the exact polar opposite of Farm Boy. We're talking about crewing. Farm Boy had the largest crew of any film I had worked on so far, with 14 people.
Nice.
Thank you. Oh yeah, it was a very different experience. A lot of my films are very minimal crews. That's how I like to keep it. That one was a much larger film, so we needed some extra hands, of course, and I'm super appreciative of that. But this new one, Tiger, we just went out and shot, me, Amin, and Karen's the actor, and just kind of experimented. Polar opposite in terms of crew to Farm Boy, but also that film was so in a way, like tightly scripted. I knew exactly what I wanted. I worked on the script for a really long time, and I'm like, this is the film. Okay. Tiger was, here are some ideas, here are vignettes, here's scene ideas, this is who the character is. Let's follow this basic narrative and then experiment within that on set. Oh, we see, I don't know, this isn't real, but like, oh, we'll see a toy gun on the ground that some kid has abandoned. So how can we incorporate that into a scene? How do we do it?
Wow,
how does
fun.
that scene play into the rest of the narrative now? So we stick within this basic narrative, but play around within that.
Okay.
Which is why it also has taken so long to kind of edit it as well, because there's such a large amount of footage where we want to stick to the narrative, but we also want to keep these experimental kind of improvised parts as well. So that's what we're working on now, and that's the one that I'm thinking we might release directly online.
Okay.
Because at this point, I think it might be done the next month or 2. That's Great. Me being optimistic, and especially we have this time now to be able to do that. So it would be really exciting if we could. But that's the film. And like I said, there's more. There's some stills on my website. People can check out in the meantime. But
I have to say,
when it's closer.
Your website homepage, the layout is baller. It's so interesting having the little the MacBook folders. I was like, this is easy to follow. I can just press. Definitely check out his website. 10 out of 10 would recommend.
Thank you so much. I appreciate that.
Yeah. Okay, great.
No, it's cool. That's the film. I don't know. I'll just I'm going to be posting more stuff as we get closer to finishing up. Just teasing it a bit more, but yeah, hopefully releasing it online. So that'll be really cool. And that's another thing I would say too is, especially for filmmakers who are playing festivals a lot, it can be tricky trying to show off your work, because my last 2 films are still currently playing festivals technically. Okay. So my work that is up and available and to the public is all from 2017.
Right, yeah.
So at a certain point, it's kind of cool to be able to like release something directly online, say, this is what I am currently, check it out. You don't have to go to a festival. You can watch it in the comfort of your home, like, but check it out.
Cool. Yes. And yeah, by the time this podcast comes out, it will probably be close to being on Vimeo. So everyone should definitely check it out.
Fingers crossed. Definitely.
Tiger Eats a Baby. Love the title. Very,
thank you.
Very suggestive. And I'm thinking of the Netflix show Tiger King for some reason.
Oh, I know. Tiger Eats a King.
Yeah.
No, it's so funny that just suddenly just came out right out of nowhere too.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Everyone's
it's like
watching
it's a little Tiger promo.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay. Well, you know what? Thank you so much for sitting and making time with me. This was awesome.
Thank you so much for having me. It was great being able to talk. Thank you.
Yeah, no, of course. And I mean, hopefully we can do this again in person, probably once quarantine is a bit over. But yeah. Thank you so much. I will pause the recording, but we will keep talking after this.
Okay, cool.
Thank you. Thank you so much for listening to the Art Versations podcast. If you like what you heard, subscribe, rate, and leave a review to help the podcast grow. As well, follow the podcast on Instagram at artversationspod. That's ARTVERSATIONSPOD. You'll find photos of each of my guests so you can match a voice to a face. Let's keep the conversation going. DM me with your own thoughts about art, as I would love to hear them. I'm always up for a good old-fashioned chat. Till next time.